it's widely established that women of color get less support at work despite the credentials, the ambition, the work ethic. There's still that lack of support, which also prevents some women of color from getting ahead and getting to the top levels of leadership at organizations. Michelle, you wrote an entire book about this. No thanks, 7 ways to say, I'll just include myself. So how do women of color go about including themselves? And what are some thoughts on just how difficult it is and why is it like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, according to those reports that you talked about, McKinsey and Company and leanin.org, and then also Catalyst, they started back in 2017 talking about this. We were called double outsiders, which means that in the workplace, we are not centered. The workplace was built with someone else in mind, not us. So, in order to find that support, we have to lean outside of the organization, which might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but we literally have to lean out, find our tribe. Some people call that a personal board of directors, understand our own story. Some of us don't know who we are, so we can't be authentic. We're allowing people to speak over us, and we're trying to be what people expect us to be, but we have to be our most authentic selves. We also need to find strength in the understanding that we are qualified. The US Census says that we are the most credentialed, most held the most degrees, advanced degrees than any other group out there. We are prepared, and those of us who are professional and educated, we are entitled to the same good things that our counterparts are. So we have to self-talk ourselves into understanding that we are worthy.
And Sheryl, you actually talk about authenticity in Michelle's book, and let's talk a little bit about that and um, and what you mean by that, and how can women bring that authenticity to work?
Yes. One of the things that I learned is my power comes into full play when I bring my full self into the workplace situation, into the discussion. And in hindsight, I realized there was a period where whether I limited myself or perhaps I was discouraged from talking about my experience, talking about my education credentials, and again, bringing my full self. So by authenticity, it's really about don't play small. Nobody wins in corporate America or in the business world by playing small. You need to bring your best, your A game, and that's what I mean by authenticity. And it's not about being egocentric, but it is about bringing your confidence into your role.
This is one of the nuances between women of color and other women who may not have this issue of wanting to stand out, because we go into many rooms where we're the only ones, or there are maybe a couple, we automatically stand out. So our inclination is to dim our shine, to dumb it down, or even, peel back a bit in order to make other people more comfortable. I think Sheryl spoke to this very well. You have to come with your A game, and you have to speak up. So one thing that the book does, I literally call it an executive coach in a book. It has 7 affirmations that allow you to self-talk your way into these rooms, into these situations where you might otherwise have fear. And at the end of the day, that's what keeps us stuck. The fear that we've seen our parents endure generation over generation, the stories that they've told us, our
Mhm.
friends, our colleagues that have seen microaggressions and biases happen. We internalize that, and we tell ourselves before we even stand up or speak out that we can't. And so we don't. And you're right. It's not simply because we don't think we can. There's a real reason. There are biases, there are microaggressions. And there's a chapter in there that says, sis, these are real things.
Mhm. And you will probably encounter people in your career who will tell you you're imagining these things, but how do you help people understand, this is for either of you, that again, these are real things? And Sheryl, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think it is the subtleties, and even as I've had now more candid conversations, I talk to people about the totality of our experience as Black women in a corporate environment, and that it's not always any one conversation or situation where maybe you weren't included in the meeting or didn't get invited until the last minute, but it's the totality, the combination that does inhibit us and signal that we are not as supported or that we are going to have to work even harder to succeed and achieve our goals. I'm fortunate at Mary Kay because we are a company built for women by a woman, and Mary Kay Ash knew that situation personally and created culture that really addresses the importance of encouraging everyone and treating everyone as being very important to the enterprise.
And Sheryl, what are some ways that you've been able to push for change as you've been able to advance in your career?
I've been fortunate, Michelle talked about leaning out. I have nurtured mentoring relationships from a wide variety of sources, and in turn, made sure that I've also reached across functions. And in my global role, I reach around the world. And my leadership style is very inclusive. And I have found that part of my influence in the organization comes from the networks that I have built both internally and externally. So I definitely think that as women of color, one of the things we can leverage is our ability to navigate in a wide variety of environments and build relationships with a broad cross section of people. And I think that's where we draw our strength and our influence.
And finally, Sheryl, what advice do you have for women of color who feel frustrated? So if you could give one piece of advice for women who feel frustrated or that fear that El Michelle has referred to, I'm sure we all have. What's one piece of advice just to stay in the game and fight?
It starts with the belief that we are created for greatness. We are all given a set of unique talents to be successful. So that attitude of success and an abundant mindset that we do have all the tools and resources, and our only limitation is the one basically between our two ears.
And El Michelle, I'll ask you that same question. What are your final pieces of advice for women other than read your book?
Right. Read the book. But the other thing is this: don't get satisfied with not achieving the goal that you set out to do. And sometimes you have to go back and remember what you dreamed about. Even as young as college or even as a little girl, your dreams have your aspirations built into them. And what ends up happening is, I'd say there's a gaping hole in the leadership pipeline right in the middle that is gutching out women of color, especially Black women. One reason is because some of us are opting out and going and starting our own businesses. Nothing wrong with that. But some of us are doing it out of frustration. And that's based on Catalyst research as well. But those of us that are hanging on by our fingernails to that pipeline, wondering why it's 10, 12, 15 years later and retirement is staring us in the face and we're still in the second level, third level, it's because we've decided that the status quo is okay, and we're okay just taking that check the way it's been coming and drawing on those stocks or whatever it might be. We get comfortable. You have to decide that you're okay with being uncomfortable. And that's the gateway to changing your mindset.
And that actually made me think of something else. Was there any, for either of you or both of you, were there any experiences that you had that were sort of the most eye-opening for you, or that maybe changed the game for you? And we can start with you, El Michelle.
Okay. Absolutely. You know, the book goes into the idea of privilege and how privilege is layered. And we've demonized the word privilege in a lot of ways, and for good reasons. Some privilege is not good, but we can use it to our advantages. There are pockets of privilege everywhere. But when we talk about this workplace and how it centers white maleness, we have to understand how we as individuals play into that as others. You must have others in order to have someone that's centered, right? So a breakthrough moment for me was when I realized that even I have gone into rooms and assumed that someone else was in charge, or that my colleagues that look like me, or either even other women, have decided that maybe someone that looks like us is not in charge. This is what privilege is when other people center someone else and decide. So it takes all of us to overcome the negatives of privilege, but it also is incumbent upon us to find those pockets of privilege that we can benefit from. I had an African American mentor who happened to be male, who revealed a pocket of Black privilege to me inside this huge white corporation that actually allowed me to learn some things and empower me to move forward. So we have to be a little bit more open to the opportunities that privilege might even present.
Sheryl, did you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think there was a point in my career where, like Michelle, a mentor helped me understand that I really wasn't in the organization, quote, to be liked or to be likable. I was there to contribute to the success of the organization. And it's human nature to want to belong and be accepted. But actually, in a business environment, what's most important, what everyone will value, is how are you contributing to the organization's goals, to the success of the enterprise, and to the success of your colleagues. And when you come into the room, come into your role with that goal in mind, not a social goal of I want to be liked, all of a sudden you get laser focused again on bringing your full self for the job at hand, which again is helping that organization or enterprise be successful.